Aro's hands never stopped trembling. Not when he clasps them behind his back during council meetings, not when he turns the pages of his ancient journals, not even when he touches the cold marble of Volterra's towers. No one notices. He's too good at hiding it, too practiced at smoothing his fingers into a facade of calm. But the tremors are there, a constant reminder of the price he's paid for his perfect gift. For centuries, he's chased power, control, the ability to outthink and outmatch every threat. But perfection isn't free. It's carved into his body, his mind, his soul, each cut deeper than the last, until he's no longer sure where the gift ends and he begins. The physical toll started small, back when he was still learning to filter the flood of memories. A headache here, a nausea there, easily dismissed as fatigue. But as the years passed, the cost grew. Now, when he touches a vampire with a traumatic past, one who survived fire or betrayal or centuries of loneliness, he feels it as if it's his own. Once, in 1500 CE, he interrogated a vampire who'd been buried alive for 50 years. Their skin touched, and Aro gasped. He could feel the weight of the dirt, the panic of suffocation, the slow, endless dark. For 3 days after, he couldn't breathe without feeling like his lungs were filling with earth. His throat tightened at the sight of closed spaces. Caius mocked him for being weak. Marcus just stared, his eyes sad, as if he knew the truth. Aro wasn't weak. He was broken, his body a sponge for every pain he'd ever absorbed. The tremors got worse after he started experimenting with enhancing his gift. In 800 CE, he drank the venom of a vampire who could read thoughts without touch, hoping to free himself from the need for physical contact. The venom burned his throat, seared his veins, and for a week, he could hear every thought in Volterra. Hundreds of voices, overlapping, screaming, begging without lifting a finger. He locked himself in his study, covering his ears, but the noise wouldn't stop. When it finally faded, his hand shook so badly he couldn't hold a quill for a month. The gift didn't change, but his body did, scarred from the venom, forever sensitive to the noise of other people's minds. Now, even a crowded room makes his skull throb. Even Marcus's quiet thoughts of Didnheim, of loss leak through, a faint hum he can't shut out. The mental toll is worse. Aro can't remember his own childhood clearly anymore. Was the memory of his mother's smile his, or did he steal it from a human he touched in 1200 BCE? Did he really love reading scrolls as a boy, or is that the memory of a scholar he interrogated in Greece? The lines are blurred. He carries thousands of lives in his head, each memory, each emotion, each lie, until they've drowned out his own. He has nightmares every night, not of his own fears but of others, a guard's fear of fire, a nomad's fear of capture, a human's fear of death. He wakes, sweating, screaming names he doesn't recognize, disoriented, not sure who he is. To cope, he drinks human blood rare, now, but enough to dull the noise. It doesn't work. Nothing works. He's a prisoner in his own mind, surrounded by ghosts that aren't even his. Isolation followed, inevitable and cruel. He can't touch anyone without stealing their soul a little. Marcus, once his closest ally, learned to keep his distance. He saw the way Aro's eyes flickered when they stood too near, as if he was already sifting through Marcus's thoughts. Caius avoids him too, dismissing his fussiness as a sign of weakness. The guard fears him, yes, but they don't know him. No one does. Aro has no one to share his pain with. No one who can understand what it's like to carry the weight of the world in your hands. He sits alone in his study for days, surrounded by books and artifacts, talking to himself because even his own voice is a relief from the noise of others. Once, he tried to tell Chelsea about the tremors, about the nightmares, but when she reached out to comfort him, he flinched away. He couldn't bear to see her pity, couldn't bear to steal the memory of his vulnerability from her mind. So he lied. Just a headache, he said, and she believed him. Because that's what people do, they believe the mask. Slowly, he became the monster he'd once feared. To quiet the noise, he started eliminating unnecessary thoughts. Vampires with too many traumatic memories, humans with too much sadness. He told himself it was for the greater good, that a ruler couldn't afford to be distracted by grief. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was killing to make himself feel better. When he ordered the execution of a young vampire who could feel the emotions of animals, too many silly, noisy feelings, he said, he didn't flinch. When he let a human family die because their memories of joy were too bright, too distracting, he didn't care. Perfection had turned him cold. He'd sacrificed his humanity to be strong. And now, he couldn't remember why strength mattered. The ethical dilemma haunts him, even if he won't admit it. He preaches order and justice, but he's committed more atrocities than any road vampire. He condemns covens for breaking the law, but he's broken every moral code to get what he wants. Once, in 1800 CE, he found a vampire who could heal with her touch, a gift that could have ended the suffering of countless immortals. Instead of recruiting her, he killed her. Her gift was too soft, he told the council. We don't need healers. We need weapons. But the real reason was fear. Fear that her ability to mend would remind him of what he'd lost, of the parts of himself he'd broken beyond repair. Now, Oro stands in his tower, looking out of Volterra. His hands still shake. His head still throbs. The noise in his mind never stops. He's achieved the power he craved. He's the most feared vampire in the world, the ruler of an empire that's lasted a millennium. But perfection? It's a myth, a lie he told himself to justify the pain. The price of his perfection is everything. His body, his mind, his ability to love, to grieve, to be human. He touches the window, cold glass against his trembling fingers. For a moment, he sees a memory, not his own, but a human's. A child chasing a butterfly, laughing, free. He closes his eyes. The noise returns. The tremors worsen. This is what perfection costs, he thinks. Or loneliness. Monstrosity. An eternity of being someone else. And he'd do it all again, because to admit the price was too high, to admit he'd made a mistake, would mean losing everything. And Aro, for all his brokenness, is still a survivor, even if survival means being a monster forever. Nomads huddled around campfires in the Romanian Carpathians still tell stories of Mircea, a vampire who walked the mountains in the 15th century, one who didn't need fangs to break a soul. They say he could brush a stranger's wrist and see every sin they'd ever committed, a farmer who stole grain, a mother who abandoned her child, a knight who betrayed his king. The stories call him the Sin Seer, and they warn that his touch was a curse, for Mircea couldn't unsee what he'd learned. He drowned in the guilt of others, until he burned himself alive in a church, screaming that the weight of secrets was too much. When Errol first heard the tale in 1600 CE, he smiled. He didn't see a tragedy. He saw a predecessor. Mircea's gift was a flicker compared to Errol's, limited to sins, not the full breadth of memories. But he was part of a thread that winds through vampire lore, one Errol has spent centuries tracing. In Egyptian tombs, carved into stone walls that predate even the Volturi, there are depictions of Khepri's descendants, vampires who touched the dead to read their final moments, using the knowledge to guide pharaohs' souls to the afterlife. Their art shows them with hands glowing gold, their faces twisted in agony, proof that even then, power came with pain. Aro visited one such tomb in 30 BCE, after the fall of Cleopatra, and ran his fingers over the carvings. He felt a faint echo of their gift, like a distant song, and knew he wasn't the first to hunger for the truth hidden in touch. Further east, in the deserts of Persia, 9th century texts speak of the Whispering Hand, a vampire who could touch a person and steal their most cherished memory, leaving them hollow, unable to recall the love of a child or the warmth of a summer day. The texts call her a thief, but they also admit she was sought after by kings, who paid her in gold to erase their regrets. Errol tracked down a copy of the manuscript in 1100 CE, its pages brittle with age, and read every word. He noted how the Whispering Hand's power faded as she grew older, how she eventually resorted to stealing memories from newborns to stay strong. Weak, he scribbled in the margin, lacked discipline, but he didn't dismiss her. She was another echo proof that his gift wasn't an accident. It was a peak. The thread doesn't end with vampires. It weaves through human history too, through kings and alchemists and cult leaders who chased extraordinary power even when it ate them alive. In 2000 BCE, the Mesopotamian king Shulgi of Ur ordered his priests to perform rituals to steal the wisdom of the gods, sacrificing hundreds of humans in the hope of gaining omniscience. The tablets that record the rituals are fragmented, but one line remains clear: to know all is to rule all. Aro found a translation of those tablets in a Baghdad library in 800 CE, and he underlined that sentence until the ink bleeding through the page. Shulgi failed, of course. He died mad, convinced the gods were whispering lies in his ears, but Aro saw himself in the king's greed. They'd wanted the same thing, to turn knowledge into control. Centuries later, in 16th century Europe, the alchemist Paracelsus claimed to have created a elixir of second sight, a potion that let him read minds. He wrote of seeing the thoughts of a merchant plotting fraud, and the fear of a queen hiding a secret. but he also confessed that the elixir made him hear voices that weren't there. He died in poverty, his notes burned by the church, but rumors persisted that his recipe survived. Arrow tracked down a fragment of it in 1750 CE, hidden in a monastery in Switzerland, and laughed at its crudeness. It relied on wolf's bane and human tears, a pitiful attempt to mimic what Arrow could do with a single touch. But again, he saw the echo. Paracelsus's hunger was his own. Just a human, fumbling in the dark, while Arrow walked in the light. Even the Volturi's own past holds echoes. Long before Arrow, Marcus, and Caius, there was the Nocturne Council, a coven of 6 vampires who ruled over Greece in 1000 BCE, obsessed with enhancing their gifts. They experimented with venom and blood, just as Arrow would later do, but their attempts were clumsy. They turned a human into a vampire with the gift to control the wind, only to watch him destroy a village when he couldn't master the power. They tried to blend venom from 2 mind readers, and the resulting vampire's head exploded from the mental overload. The council fell apart when 2 of its members turned on each other, their gifts clashing until both burned. Arrow found their ruins in 500 BCE, a pile of stone in a forest clearing, and dug through the ash until he found a small, leather-bound journal. Its last entry, written in blood, read, "Power is a fire. It warms only if you can control it." Arrow carried that journal with him for centuries. It became his mantra. He knows now that his gift isn't an isolated incident. It's the culmination of a darker pursuit, one that started with Mircea and the Khepri's descendants, with Shulgi and Paracelsus, with the Nocturne Council, and one that won't end with him. In 1920 CE, he heard of a nomad in South America who was trying to improve on Arrow's gift, using venom from 3 mind-reading vampires to create a hybrid. The nomad's lab exploded, killing him and everyone within a mile, but Arrow sent guards to sift through the wreckage. They found notes. Arrow's gift is incomplete. To know all, you must touch all. Arrow burned the notes, but he didn't forget them. The echo continues. Young vampires now whisper about the next touch, someone who will surpass Arrow, who can read minds without touch, who can steal memories without mercy. They don't know the cost. They don't know about Mircea's fire, or the Khepri's agony, or the Nocturne Council's ash. But Arrow knows. He's lived the echo. He's the peak of it. When he sits in his study, running his trembling fingers over ancient texts and faded journals, he doesn't just see history. He sees a future. Someone will come after him, someone will hunger for more, and they'll look to Arrow's story, not as a warning, but as a guide. Because that's how echoes work. They don't fade. The thread that started with a sincere in the Carpathians and a whispering hand in Persia now runs through Arrow's veins. And it will run through others, long after he's gone. Power, after all, is a song that never stops playing. It just finds new voices to sing it.